Hello, and welcome to our lesson about dividing decimals. Okay, so we've talked about division of whole numbers. Now we're going to look at division of decimal numbers. Okay, so our big idea says division of decimal numbers follows the same algorithm or process. Process is another word for algorithm as whole number division. Okay, when we divide decimal numbers, we must pay attention to the decimal points at the start. Okay, so first we're going to review the parts of a division equation. Okay, and this should look familiar to you because this was in our lesson on whole number division. Okay, so we have 8 divided by 2 equals 4 is our division equation. The dividend is 8 because that is what we start with. That's how many we have that we're starting with, that we're actually dividing. The 2 is called our divisor because this is either how many groups we're making or how many are in each group when we divide the 8 out. Okay. And then 4 is our quotient or our solution. Okay, and then our helpful tip here, reminder that the dividend is on the inside of the box. Okay, and then the divisor, where do you wear a visor? Outside. Okay, so the divisor goes on the outside of the box. Okay, so those are just some quick review of the parts of a division equation. Okay, now we're going to look at a review of the standard algorithm for whole number division. Okay, so again, this is just a review. So we have 468 divided by 3. So what we would say, and again, we're going to just ignore this. Okay, we're going to ignore all of the work that's been done and just look at it step by step. Okay, and reminder that you're going to break it down into little chunks. Okay, so we would say 3 goes into 4 one time because 3 times 1 equals 3. Okay. And then we would say 4 minus 3 equals 1. And then we're going to bring down the 6. Okay. Now 16 is our new dividend. Okay. So now we say 3 goes into 16 5 times because 3 times 5 equals 15. Okay. And then 16 minus 15 equals 1. And then we bring down the 8. Now 18 is our new dividend. 3 goes into 18 6 times because 6 times 3 equals 18. And then 18 minus 18 equals 0. Okay, so that is the process. That is the standard algorithm for whole number division. Okay, so that's a good review for as we move into dividing decimal numbers. Okay, so this challenge question is going to be a little bit different than the previous challenge questions that we have in our lessons, in the fact that I just really want you to think about this, and I'm not necessarily going to answer this one for you yet. Okay. So the challenge says, how do you think you will solve this expression? So you've got 4 and 2 tenths divided by 2. Okay. So I want you to pause and I want you to answer how you think you're going to solve this expression. And then when you come back, we're not going to go over this because I want us to move forward in the lesson and to be able to learn through the lesson. And then you can kind of come back and see if you were right, if you were close to right, or if you were way off. Okay. So go ahead and pause. And when you come back, I'm going to have page 2 up and ready to go. Okay, so we are looking at page 2, and this is going to be a little bit of a visual and some wording to help you remember the process of dividing with decimal numbers. Okay. So here we have when there's a decimal point in the house, raise it to the roof. Okay. And we're going to get to what that means in just a minute. Okay. So we have the decimal point in the house. We're going to raise it to the roof. That's going to be our first rule for dividing decimals. And then when there's a decimal point outside, let them both slide. Okay, so you've got two decimal points that you are letting slide. Okay, so when there's a decimal point in the house, raise it to the roof. When there's a decimal point outside, let them both slide. Then divide like normal. And this means like our standard algorithm. Okay, dividing like normal. Okay, so let me show you and discuss what we mean by in the house and outside. Okay, so first of all, when there's a decimal point in the house, raise it to the roof. Okay, so follow this arrow, and we're looking at our that same expression 4 and 2/10 divided by 2. Okay, so we have the 4 and 2/10 divided by 2. Okay. Our 4 and 2/10 is our dividend. So it goes on the inside. And then our 2 is the divisor. Okay. So when there's a decimal point in the house, that's meaning inside. Okay. So in other words, in the house is the dividend. Okay. So on the inside. And what we do is we raise it to the roof. Okay. And so we are just placing it in our quotient here. Okay. And then divide like normal. Okay. So now we've got our decimal point that's already placed. And now basically what we have is 42 divided by 2. Okay. So we've already got that decimal point placed there in the quotient. And then we say 2 goes into 4 2 times because 2 times 2 equals 4. And then I subtract 4 minus 4 to get 0. Then I bring down the 2. Okay, and then 2 goes into 2 one time because 1 times 2 equals 2. And then I subtract that to get 0. Okay, so your quotient is 4, or your equation is 4 and 2/10 divided by 2 equals 2 and 1/10. Okay, so this is what we mean by when there's a decimal point in the house, raise it to the roof. Okay, so we want to start out raising it up into the quotient so that we don't leave it out. Okay, and then we really can just ignore it. Okay, here now it's still recorded here, and that's fine. Okay, but we really can just ignore it to make it look like this. Okay, when we've already recorded our decimal point. Okay, and then the next one, when there's a decimal point outside, okay, and then that's showing here. So we've changed the expression up just a little bit here. So in order to illustrate this, I made this 2 and 1/10 instead of 2 like it was over here. Okay, so when there's a decimal point outside, let them both slide. Okay, and so what we mean by slide is bring them over until the divisor is a whole number. That is what's important. Okay. So when there's a decimal point outside, that is referring to the divisor. Okay. Because the divisor is outside. And we let them both slide. Okay, so we're going to slide the decimal point over as many times as it takes to make the divisor a whole number. Okay, so now this 2 and 1/10 is 21. Okay, since I slid this decimal point one time, I also slide this decimal point one time in the dividend. Okay. So 4 and 2 tenths now becomes 42. Okay. So that's what we mean by when there's a decimal point outside, we let them both slide. And it's super important. We're going to get into it in just a few minutes. It's super important that you are sliding that decimal point the same number of times with the dividend. You're sliding it the same number of times that you did with the divisor. Okay. So in this case, each of the numbers only have the one decimal place. Okay. So you can only slide it one time. Okay. All right. And then you go ahead and you divide like normal. So 21 goes into 42 two times because 21 times 2 equals 42. Okay. So 4 and 2 tenths divided by 2 and 1 tenth equals 2. Okay. And that's our quotient. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at page 3. And page 3 is a you try. Okay. And there are two separate expressions that I want you to solve on your own. And it says divide, but then it gives you the reminder. If a decimal point is in the house, raise it to the roof. If a decimal point is outside, let them both slide. And if you need to, you can look back at page 2 to help you with that. Okay. So I'm going to get you started by just setting up the expressions inside the box, okay? The division setup, okay? So we have 6 and 2 tenths divided by 2. So this is saying we have 6 and 2 tenths. So that's our dividend, which means that it goes on the inside. And we are dividing it into 2. Okay, so the divisor is 2. And then with this one, we have 4 and 5 tenths divided by 1 and 5 tenths. Okay, so we've got 4 and 5 tenths is what we start with. That's our dividend. And then 1 and 5 tenths is our divisor. Okay, so go ahead and pause and solve those two expressions and then come back when you're finished and we'll check it. Okay, welcome back. Okay, so now we're going to focus on 6 and 2 tenths divided by 2. So remember, if a decimal point is in the house, raise it to the roof. Okay, so we have a decimal point in the house. So we are going to bring it straight up in our quotient. Okay, and then we're ready to divide. So we've got 2 goes into 6 3 times because 3 times 2 equals 6. And then when I subtract, I get 0 and I bring down the 2. And then 2 goes into 2 one time because 1 times 2 equals 2. And then I subtract again and I get 0. So my quotient is 3 and 1 tenth. Okay, so pat on the back if you got that correct. If you didn't, review it and see where you went wrong. Okay, and then the other expression is 4 and 5 tenths divided by 1 and 5 tenths. Okay, so this time there is a decimal point outside. Okay, yes, we have one inside, but decimal point outside, that's the one that we really need to focus on here. Okay, so we have a decimal point outside, so we let them both slide until the divisor is a whole number. Okay, so the divisor has to be a whole number to be able to divide. Okay, so we slid the decimal point one time, and now our divisor is 15. Okay, but now we also have to slide the decimal point in the dividend one time. Okay, so our dividend is 45. Okay, all right, and so now we have 45 divided by 15, okay? And we know that 15 times 3 equals 45, so that means that 45 divided by 15 equals 3, okay? All right, pat on the back if you got that one correct. Okay, now we're going to look at what is actually happening mathematically here. Okay, so when we slide those decimal points, remember we are actually multiplying by a power of 10. Okay, so when we slide those decimal points one time, which is what we did in this case here, we are actually multiplying by 10. Okay, we're multiplying 4 and 5 tenths by 10 to get 45, and we're multiplying 1 and 5 tenths by 10 to get 15. Okay, all right, and then we say 4 and 5 tenths divided by 1 and 5 tenths is the same as 45 divided by 15 because we multiplied each number by 10. Okay. So since we're changing the value of 4 and 5 tenths and 1 and 5 tenths, that means that our value of our quotient is the same, okay, because we multiplied by 10. Okay. All right. So in order to divide, the divisor must be a whole number. Okay. And that's what we talked about here. Okay. So we have to move that decimal point. We have to slide that decimal point until the divisor is a whole number. Okay. And then we make sure that we do the exact same thing to the dividend. So that way it keeps our values the same. Okay. To make the divisor a whole number, we will multiply by a power of 10. And whatever you multiply the divisor by, you must also multiply the dividend by. Okay, and that's what I just said. So, in order for this to be accurate, okay, you have to do what you did to 4 and 5 tenths. You have to do that to 1 and 5 tenths, okay? Or otherwise, you're not going to get a correct value, okay? Okay, let's look at page 4. And what I want you to do here, this is a think question, okay? It says, what is different about this expression? So we have 2 and 76 hundredths divided by 1 and 2 tenths. Okay, so I want you to pause and I want you to think and I want you to write in this box what you see that is different about this expression than the ones that we've looked at this far. Okay, so go ahead and pause. Okay, welcome back. So, the difference in this expression and the ones that we've been looking at. So, for instance, we looked at 4 and 5 tenths divided by 1 and 5 tenths. And we also looked at 4 and 2 tenths divided by 2 and 1/10. Okay, so the difference here is that the dividend has two decimal places. Okay, whereas the dividend here only has one decimal place in each of these expressions. So this is going to be a little bit different when we solve now because the dividend has two decimal places. Okay, so here, which number is the dividend? 2 and 76 hundredths. And then which number is the divisor? 1 and 2 tenths. Okay. And which number must be whole? Remember, we just talked about that. The divisor must be a whole number. So that is 1 and 2 tenths in this expression. So we have to make sure that our divisor is a whole number. It doesn't matter if our dividend still has a decimal point, right? So let's look down here at this problem all worked out. But I don't want you to look at it as big picture. I want you to look at it step by step. So let's look here at step 1. Okay, so step 1, I've got my expression set up. I've got my dividend inside the box. I've got my divisor outside the box. Okay. We have a decimal point outside, which means in the divisor. So we're going to let them both slide. Okay. So we are going to let the decimal point slide until the divisor is whole. Okay, so that means that we're only going to need to slide one place in the divisor. Okay, so we slide that decimal point one place, it becomes 12. Okay, so the dividend, we're only going to slide one place. Okay, so our dividend still is going to have a decimal point in it. Okay, because we just need the divisor to be whole. Okay, it doesn't matter if the dividend still has a decimal point. Okay, so right here it says the dividend has two decimal places, but the divisor only has one decimal place. Okay, so we're getting rid of this decimal point in the divisor by sliding it to the right. What we're actually doing is multiplying by 10. Okay, and so we have to multiply the dividend by 10, which means that the decimal point ends between the 7 and the 6. Okay. Then we look at step 2. Okay. So we've got the 12 is our divisor because we've made it whole by multiplying it by 10. And then our 2 and 76 hundredths has become 27 and 6 tenths. Okay, now we have a decimal point is still in the house. Okay, so it's in the dividend. So we raise it to the roof. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bring that decimal point up so that we don't forget about it in our quotient. Okay, then step 3, we're ready to solve. So now we've got 27 and 6 tenths divided by 12. Okay, so we've got 12 goes into 27 two times because 2 times 12 equals 24. 27 minus 24 equals 3. And then we bring down our 6. Okay, and then 12 goes into 36 three times because 3 times 12 equals 36. 36 minus 36 equals 0. Okay, so 27 and 6 tenths divided by 12 equals 2 and 3 tenths. So that means that 2 and 76 hundredths divided by 1 and 2 tenths equals 2 and 3 tenths. And that's because we multiplied 1 and 2 tenths by 10 and we multiplied 2 and 76 hundredths by 10. So that keeps the value the same. Okay, so we get the same quotient. Okay, so here it says we slide the decimal point in the dividend the same number of times as we move the decimal point in the divisor. Okay, and that keeps the value the same. Okay. Okay, let's look at page 5. And page 5 is all a you try. So, what I want you to do is divide and solve both of these expressions. And there's the reminder here with the little pictures at the bottom to help you remember. Okay, so I'm going to just have you pause and solve these two expressions, and then you can come back when you're finished and we will check them. Okay, welcome back. So we have 2 and 86 hundredths divided by 2 and 2 tenths. Okay, so 2 and 86 hundredths is our dividend. So that goes on the inside. And then 2 and 2 tenths is our divisor. So that goes on the outside. Okay, remember it is important that we have a whole number as our divisor. Okay, so 2 and 2 tenths, in order to make that a whole number, we're going to slide that decimal point one place, which means we're actually multiplying it by 10, and now it becomes 22. Okay, since we multiplied our divisor by 10, we also have to multiply our dividend by 10, and that means we move the decimal point one place. Okay, so now it is 28 and 6 tenths. Okay, so now we have a new expression that is going to have the same value quotient as this one because we multiplied the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. Okay, so now we have a decimal point still in the house, so we're going to raise it to the roof. Okay, and then we are ready to solve. So 22 will go into 28 one time because 1 times 22 is 22. And then whenever I subtract 28 minus 22, that is 6. And then I'm ready to bring down the other 6. Okay, 22 goes into 66 three times because 3 times 22 equals 66. Okay, and then when I subtract, I get 0. So that means that my quotient is 1 and 3 tenths. Okay, so 2 and 86 hundredths divided by 2 and 2 tenths equals 1 and 3 tenths. Okay, pat on the back and a big check mark if you got that correct. If you didn't, go back and review. Okay. All right, and then the last one, 15 and 36 hundredths divided by 2 and 4 tenths. Okay, so 15 and 36 hundredths is our dividend. It's how much we start with. And divided by 2 and 4 tenths. So 2 and 4 tenths is our divisor. Okay, again, we have a decimal point outside, so we need to let them both slide. We have to have that divisor has to be a whole number. Okay, so 2 and 4 tenths becomes 24. Okay, and what we really did here was multiply by 10. So we also need to multiply our dividend by 10. And to do that, our decimal point is going to move one place. Okay, so we have 153 and 6 tenths. Okay, we still have a decimal point in the house, so we're going to raise it to the roof. Okay, now we have 153 and 6 tenths divided by 24. Okay, now we're getting into a little bit of a bigger problem here than we've been looking at. So we can think about how many times will 24 go into 153. Okay, and so what you might need to do is go over to the side and then take some educated guesses. So 24, let's say 5, 24 times 5. So 5 times 4 is 20, and 5 times 2 plus 2 is 12. So we have 120, and we're trying to get to 153. Okay, so can I put another group of 24 into 120 and not go over 153? Okay, well, let's add another group of 24. So 0 plus 4 is 4, 2 plus 2 is 4, and then 1. Okay, so I have 144. Okay, and I'm trying to get to 153. So this here, 144, is 24 times 6. Okay, so it's 6 groups because this was 5 groups, then we added another group of 24. Okay, so I can't put another group of 24 in to 144 without going over 153. So I can say that 24 goes into 153 6 times because 6 times 24 is 144. Okay, so then I subtract. I can't do 3 minus 4, so I'm going to borrow. And then I give that to the 3. So then I have 13 minus 4, which is 9. and then 4 minus 4 and 1 minus 1 are 0. Okay, and then I'm ready to bring down the 6. Okay, so now I need to think about how many times 24 will go into 96. Well, I know that two groups of 24 is 48, and then two groups of 48 is 96. So that tells me that 24 times 4 should be 96. Okay. So, but just to be sure, we can work it out. 4 times 4 is 16. And then 2 times 4 plus 1, yes, is 96. Okay. So 24 goes into 96 four times because we know that 24 times 4 is 96. And then when I subtract, I get 0. Okay, so my quotient is 6 and 4 tenths. Okay, so pat on the back and a big check mark if you got that correct. If you didn't, go back and review. Okay, and that is the end of this lesson. I hope that you have learned about dividing decimals, and I will see you in the next video lesson.